This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine motivational management.
Plus, Ford makes a recommitment to U.S. manufacturing. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 6th, 2017. Happy New Year to all of you. Dirk, Happy New Year to you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully you had a good holiday.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was. Always a nice break. It's been 3 weeks since we did a QDL. Do you know that?
Seems like forever.
I know. It's been a long time. I'm sure you all missed us too. So
Yes,
QDL is,
counting the hours till we came back.
It's like, when are they coming back? QDL, of course, is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And that you are. And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. So, our next story, I think, is a case study in, I don't know, risk management, I think. At least that's the way I look at it. I have been slowly replacing all of our incandescent and CFL compact fluorescent light bulbs with LED bulbs in our house over the past couple years. The LED bulbs, they use about an eighth to a tenth of the power for the same amount of light. They run cooler and they last a whole lot longer. However, they are expensive, more expensive than incandescent or CFL, but way less so than they used to be. And as an example, I use 120 watt equivalent recessed lighting in our kitchen. Those LED bulbs used to cost, and I'm talking about 3 years ago, a whopping $35 each. Yeah. And I've got 6 of them. Yeah. So, do the math, a couple $100. Yeah. But the warranty is like for 7 years, so I don't care. I mean, they don't last 7 years. I'm constantly, every couple years, I take one back and they replace it for free. So I'm basically free lighting for life is the way I look at it. Now those same bulbs cost about $20 for two. It's $10 each, from $35 to $10 each. So roughly 1/3 of the cost of what they were a few years ago. In fact, according to the Department of Energy, the cost of LED lighting has dropped 94% since 2008. And from 2014 to 2015, the number of LED installations grew by 160%. So more and more people are buying them. So of course, the cost of LED lighting has plummeted, which is great for energy and cost-conscious consumers. But as it turns out, this isn't so hot for those who manufacture LED lights. According to the article, drop in LED prices drives manufacturers away. The profit margins, according to that article, of traditional lighting companies are shrinking to the point where companies like, names you'll be familiar to you, GE, Philips, and one you're maybe not so familiar with, Osram Licht. Those are big light bulb companies. They are getting out of the lighting business because the profit margins are too small. And the problem is that LEDs are made by semiconductor companies or semiconductor devices who then sell those LEDs to the traditional lighting companies, GE, Philips, and so forth, which cuts into those companies' profits. I mean, there's the middleman or lots of middlemen all along the way from the semiconductor company to, let's say, Philips. And so it's cutting into their profits. And of course, at the same time, companies that have their own semiconductor houses are going, awesome, let's get into the lighting business, which increases competition, drives down prices, and you get the picture. Oh, and to add insult to injury, LED lights last a whole lot longer than other light sources, so you don't buy them as often. So why bring this up? This is a classic case, I think, of not paying attention to emerging technology and preparing for it. Basic risk management from a sustainability, longevity point of view for your company's product lines. What is the state of a particular technology? How does it impact my company or its products? How do I mitigate that risk? Now, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine report that this article was based on hints at one way lighting manufacturers could have mitigated that risk, which is simply to leverage their own skill sets in other areas. After all, GE and Philips, these are not just light bulb companies, they're huge technology companies. Why not do something more with LEDs than simply light up a space? So think of things like, smart lights or connected lights, or even the form factor of the lights themselves. Using the technology that these companies already have, they could have added value to LED lighting, which would have increased their profit margin instead of getting out of the lighting business, which Osram Licht and I believe Philips also have. They sold off their lighting business, or in the process of selling off their lighting business. The same idea really applies to all of us. What are the emerging technologies, and how do you leverage them rather than let them put you out of business? Particularly in today's fast-growing technology environment, no matter what your business is, you have to keep on top of emerging technologies and how people use that technology. I mean, even a little media company like Quality Digest has to keep its eyes on that. We have to be aware of what's going on in electronic media. How is that going to affect us? Companies like Google and all the advertising going to Google. Fortunately, not all of it, but a lot of it. And how do you compete with that? How do you stay on top of it? You got to stay ahead of it in order to stay in business. My prediction is that this will be a big topic for this year, particularly with the new administration coming in. Technology versus jobs. What is taking the jobs away? Is it technology, or is it outsourcing? What is it? And I think we're going to have to really stay on top of what's going on with technology and jobs. There's a lot of talk going on about this, particularly in Silicon Valley right now, is how do you mitigate the effect of technology and jobs?
Yeah, I mean, the statement always is cannibalization. You always worry about somebody cannibalizing your business. Well, you want to cannibalize your own business, because if you don't, somebody else will.
Right.
You want to own that. I mean, the classic example of that actually was Kodak. And I didn't know this. I read this last year. Kodak actually a Kodak engineer was one who invented digital film technology, digital photography.
Oops.
And Kodak said, well, we can't get involved in that because 90% of our profits are based on paper.
Right.
So we can't embrace that technology because it'll end our paper.
So somebody else did.
Somebody else did, and what happened to Kodak and Kodak's paper?
There was no longer a Kodak company in Rochester. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, paper prints of photos.
Well, film too, by the way.
I mean, it's all pretty much going away. But I mean, Kodak could have owned that whole thing. One of their engineers developed it, but they didn't want to do it because they were afraid of cannibalizing their paper business. Fascinating the way these things work, but
crazy.
Scary too. All right, thanks, Dirk. Okay, well, we're always interested, of course, in bringing you creative solutions to solve operational challenges that you may have on the shop floor. Well, in that light, we wanted to call special attention to the short article, 1-Point Lesson Plans, which was written by William Brum, that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Quality Digest, you'll see it right there. Well, as its name would imply, the 1-Point Lesson Plan is a quick and simple tool, and it's intended to help share basic information about a machine or a process, procedure, whatever it may be. By its very design, the 1-Point Lesson Plan is also really visual in nature, and the article offers an example from Brum's very own company, Butler Automatic Inc. And Butler Automatic Inc. is an interesting little company. They're a manufacturer of equipment allowing the easy splicing of individual rolls of material, such as that used for like pouches or shrink sleeve packaging. A lot of food packaging is done through these rollers. And basically, they splice together these materials, and that's what Butler does. Well, as you can see from the image, and this is an image that was in the article itself, and there's the image right there. It's a little small, but you can kind of make it out. A 1-Point Lesson Plan is ideal for something like, in this case, a core adapter inspection. Those are those two, the white and the black rolls that you see there. This document contains clear images of the part or the parts, the visuality there. It also gives a quick overview of how the process is intended to function, and some general signs. You can see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 down there. Some general signs of where that you would need to be aware of to indicate that the part needs to be replaced. And finally, at the bottom of the form, there's a training record indicating when the process was demonstrated, by whom, and then you can see that right at the bottom there, so you can kind of keep a track of that. Well, the key idea here is that the work instruction is broken down to its most basic component, and it's visual. Anyone can tell at a glance what the process is all about and what to look out for in managing it. And there's nothing extraneous or overly complicated here. It's just the basic facts needed to keep the process, the machine running smoothly. And that's a really good lesson, I think, because many times we make things really difficult and complex on the shop floor. We know this, and it really doesn't need to be that way. That we kind of forget the importance of visuality and the idea that you want to be able to see something right away and understand what it's intended to do. And if it's not working, not functioning properly, you want to understand how you can correct it really quickly. That little one step lesson plan really gives that to you very, very basically.
And that goes with the product?
It goes right there on the floor. So
okay.
right where that is in that particular workstation, there'll be that visual poster where somebody can walk by and see what it is, and you can do that on your first day of the job. It's so simple that you can understand right away what that thing's intended to do, and if it's not working properly, how you can improve it.
And nobody likes to read a lot of text, so they just boil it down to almost bullet points. What you need,
right there, and then it also has, again, at the very bottom, little hash marks where you can say when somebody was trained on it, who the trainer was. So if it's not working properly or something needs to be gone back to the person who trained on it, you need to maybe do a little work inspection on that. You can do that right there as well. Really useful little tool there. Really kind of cool little article.
Okay, you should go read that article. As usual, all the articles are underneath the player page. Click on them and you can go out there and you can read more about it.
That's right.
Speaking of articles, there was to me anyway, thought-provoking article by one of our old-time columnists, Paul Naysmith. Haven't heard from him in a while. He's back in Scotland working. His article was called Managing Motivation, a Quality Alternative to Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, in which Naysmith takes issue, as many have, with the validity of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a motivational model. Now, if you aren't familiar with Maslow's theory of a human's hierarchy of needs, here is a diagram of his famous needs pyramid, which, by the way, his theory was originally published in 1943 as a theory of human motivation. Now, if we just look at it, the basic idea here, oh, that's interesting. There,
psychological.
Wow. Physiological.
Physiological.
I don't know what's going on there. Physiological. That basically, the idea behind Maslow's needs is that they build on each other, and you need to build up on this pyramid. So the first thing we all need, according to Maslow, is our physiological needs taken care of. We're talking, food, water, just the things you need to stay alive. Next is safety, things like physical safety. You don't want to be shot at by arrows or bullets. This could also include things like job security. Next would be belonging, kind of the social aspect, including maybe work. Esteem, am I valued? And finally, self-actualization, a desire to accomplish everything that one can. So not everybody agrees with this, and remember, this is a 70-year-old theory, and so a lot of people disagree with it. They think it's very ethnocentric. But from a management perspective, you could look at this as, what do I need to do as a manager to help employees at each level so as to help motivate them? So, for instance, obviously, pay a living wage, acknowledge them. That kind of might meet the emotional needs. Train them or encourage them. Those might deal with the emotional or the self-actualization. So, give them a safe work environment. So, it kind of ties into all of that. And if you do all that, the theory says that you'll be building on those needs and you'll have a motivated employee. Right. Now, in his article, Naysmith disagrees with using Maslow's needs, as many have. And he says he prefers to look at motivation along the lines that Christy Hedges did in her Forbes article, 8 Common Causes of Workplace Demotivation, in which she notes that common reasons for demotivation in the workplace kind of fall in 8 distinct areas, and she lists them like this. You've got micromanagement, lack of progress, job insecurity, no confidence in the company leadership, lack of recourse for poor performance, poor communication, unpleasant co-workers, and boredom. I actually think Naysmith may have misunderstood Maslow a bit, because, and I say this because of one thing that Naysmith says in his article. He says management schools would encourage you to assess yourself against Maslow's pyramid and determine if you are deficient in any needs. If you are deficient, in other words, putting the blame on the employee. But I don't think those who look to Maslow's needs as a guideline for motivation necessarily look at it that way. It's more, where are we deficient as managers in meeting those employee needs? And this is kind of quickly borne out if you research Maslow's needs and management motivation or the like. Now, that said, I do agree with Hedges, just as Naysmith does. Her 8 items are actually right on the money, and also happen to fit in with more of Maslow's categories, but that's just my own personal observation. I don't see a whole lot of difference there. Essentially what Maslow or Hedges or pretty much any organizational psychologist will tell you is that, hey, guess what? Employees have needs.
People are people.
People are people.
That's right.
They've got personal needs. It is not just about the wage, although that is important. You got to have a living wage. And maybe it's not even about the order of those needs, whatever those needs are. It's just the needs themselves. Employees want to be valued. People want to be valued. They usually want to feel part of a group and to be able to get along with coworkers. So in other words, they want to have a nice work environment. They want to be able to grow in their job and to stretch their wings, self-actualization, and so forth. It is the job of managers as much as possible to create a culture, a workspace, an environment, whatever you want to call it, where those needs can be met. And doing that is a huge part of motivating employees so that going to work isn't a grind, but maybe perhaps, an enjoyable experience. If you got to be there, you got to want to enjoy it. And if you enjoy your job to some extent, as much as possible, you are motivated to do a better job. As, oh my gosh, there's another drudge work. I'm just going to punch the clock and phone it in, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. People are these vulnerable parts of your operating system, really, and you have to not just manage them, but you have to really care for them in a way. I mean, we don't want to be overly touchy-feely here, Right. I mean, this idea of that we need to have a supportive workplace. That's in ISO's language now a little bit has been given poked some holes in, and it's been criticized a little bit. But there's some truth there that
because it helps the bottom line.
Well, it does.
It's in your own self-interest.
It is, and that's what I was going to say is that there's a real motivation here. You're playing on that title. There's a real motivation here from the organizational perspective to have happy employees. Happy employees are more productive employees.
Less turnover. Less absenteeism.
Yes, and more productivity. And more productivity. To do better work. I mean, I know this myself. I mean, when I feel like I'm engaged in something and that I've been given the freedom to, within the framework of the company, build it in the way that I know I'm going to respond best to, I'm going to do good work with that. I'm going to feel like I'm invested in it, and I'm going to own it, and it's going to be better.
And by the way, unions won't like hearing this, but it has been borne out in a lot of examples that happy employees will stay on the job for less money.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Just saying.
Yeah, money is the lowest common denominator, but it's not really, as we talk about motivation and the hierarchy of needs, it's not really at the very top of that. It's part of it. It's a big part of it, but it's not the only thing. And to say you're just going to throw the money at the problem and reward somebody with cash if they're unhappy, it's a Band-Aid, but it's not going to be a long-term solution.
Yeah, exactly.
And these are people. These aren't automated. I mean, we're not yet in the environment where all workforces are all automated. I mean, it's like, there's people doing this work. You got to respect them for that. All right, thanks, Dirk. All right, well, we closed 2016 and we opened the new year here at Quality Digest by spending some time talking about certain emerging social, political, and economic issues and how they might affect the pursuit of quality and performance excellence in the future, particularly for organizations here in the United States. We actually, on the last episode of Quality Digest Live, a week before Christmas, you remember, Dirk, I kind of threw some questions at you that you weren't prepared for. We're going to kind of throw that back later on the show. But, so we touched on some of these topics and others that are related to it. And your opinions when we did that piece here on QDL helped me when I wrote the article, Ask and Ye Shall Perceive, which ran in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest. And I've already had some comments on that. I hope more of you will comment on that article. Well, one of the questions I posed in that article involved issues of trade, specifically how and if we can reward companies that keep factories here or punish those that flee. And when I say we, I mean the United States society, government, those that represent us. Well, accordingly, major U.S. manufacturers have been very much in the news lately, wrestling with the implications of that question. The QD article, Ford announces U.S. plan expansion to make electric vehicles and autonomous cars, which ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest, offers some timely, I think really timely insights into how the incoming Trump administration is going to influence those very decisions. As reported in the article in a live webcast earlier this week from the company's Flat Rock assembly plant in Michigan, Ford President and CEO Mark Fields made an interesting statement. I want to read it for you verbatim as it was quoted in the article, because I think it's really interesting to listen and read what he said. I'm going to comment on it here in a moment. What Fields said is, we are encouraged we are encouraged by the pro-growth policies that President-elect Trump and the new Congress have indicated they will pursue. We believe that these tax and regulatory reforms are critically important to boost U.S. competitiveness and drive resurgence in American manufacturing and high-tech innovation. All these factors, coupled with segmentation shifts that we're seeing in the marketplace and our efforts to fully utilize the capacity at existing facilities, have prompted us to invest in Flat Rock's expansion and to cancel building a new plant in Mexico.
That was the that was the carrot.
That was the carrot.
That was the carrot.
There's sticks and carrots in there. That was the carrot. And that was Mark Fields, President and CEO of Ford. Now, this is a $700 million commitment for Ford, and it will mean several hundred jobs, new jobs for workers in Michigan. President-elect Trump had tangled with Ford in general and Fields in particular during the recent presidential campaign, alternatively offering those carrots and using some sticks as well to drive just this kind of result that we're seeing right there. That we're seeing there in Flat Rock. Now, this reads as a feel-good event for all parties, not the least of which is the incoming administration, of course. It's made a lot of political hay over this and other events like this in the last couple of months. But there's a lot in Fields' statement beyond the relatively straightforward happy news about jobs coming to Michigan instead of Mexico. And then let's think about this. Let's unpack a little bit what he's saying here and what maybe it means. Well, he's encouraged by pro-business, pro-growth chatter in the new administration. Well, duh. I mean, Ford's a big company, right? They're a very, very large publicly traded company, market value at several multiple of billions of dollars. So that all sounds good to them. He's also looking forward to tax and regulatory reform. Well, double duh, right? I mean, again, big company, tax breaks, regulatory reforms, things that make it easier, less complicated for large organizations to do business. Sounds good to him. He sees the market segmentation shifting towards autonomous vehicles and electric cars, which is interesting, of course, that we've all seen that. But the question is, will they see a shift back? Are we already seeing a shift back if climate change and an oil drilling bonanza kind of drops gas prices even lower? What I meant to say there is I kind of bollocks that. If climate change is continually chipped away at, the idea of climate change as a scientific reality is less prevalent in regulatory affairs. And if people say, well, there is no climate change and we don't have to worry about it so much, instead we're going to drill, America's going to be energy independent now, is that going to force or make Fields and Ford and other auto manufacturers take a step away from the progress towards autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles because they say, hey, gas is cheap. I mean, gas prices are $1.50 a gallon all across the country. Do we even care? Let's just crank out a bunch more F-150s, right? I mean,
keeping in mind that gas is subsidized, but besides
that's true. But I mean, it's still for the pocketbook of the consumer, gas could be a lot cheaper. Probably will be. Another thing was interesting here is he's not, quote, not advocating for increased manufacturing capacity, at least not yet. They're simply utilizing capacity that already exists at Flat Rock. So this is being spun as something that on the surface is not totally accurate. The capacity is already there. They're not building a new factory in Flat Rock. They're not, they're basically just using the capacity that's already there to be more efficient for an investment.
And adding more employees to it.
They are adding more employees, yes. They are adding hundreds of more employees. Now, of course, Trump hasn't even been inaugurated yet, but we've already seen his looming presence at play with decisions like this. I mean, Carrier's decision to keep some jobs in Indiana a couple months ago, and of course a fat tax break from the state of Indiana helped there. Trump has also threatened General Motors with huge tariffs if they try to bring Mexican-built Chevrolet Cruzes into the States. And the company responded that the units that nameplate is being built in Mexico are for foreign markets only. So there was a little bit of back and forth there. And that USO Cruiser being made in Lordstown, Ohio.
Actually, the majority of the 190,000 Cruises are made in
Georgetown. But interestingly, though, GM announced...
Lordstown.
Lordstown, I'm sorry. GM announced, though, that some job cuts are happening in Lordstown, in the Lordstown plant, as well as others across the country. Now, Toyota, too. There's been threats now that Toyota Corollas made in Mexico are going to be tariffed heavily if they try to bring them over the country.
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting about that is the Toyota, the Toyota cars that are going to be built, or some of the Toyota cars that are going to be built in Mexico, weren't taken from the United States. It was taken from, they were built in Canada.
Oh. Well, there's NAFTA at work for you, right? I mean, No, but I mean, this is exactly what's going on. I mean, the question is, and really it'll be for discussion, we'll discuss this later, but I mean, is this tactic of the administration, this tactic of rewarding or punishing those for keeping jobs in the U.S., I mean, is that going to be effective? Is there going to emerge some rules around this, or is it going to happen on a case-by-case, a company-by-company basis? I mean, is it feasible? Is it feasible? Is it desirable? Is it possible for the administration to go company by company and look at each individual move from companies that are either in the U.S. or want to come to the U.S. or thinking about coming to the U.S. and offering some sort of incentives on a state-by-state basis maybe to have them keep their jobs here? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how feasible that is. You're talking about hundreds or maybe thousands of companies over the next several years that are going to contemplate moving production facilities. Can the administration go in every time and make these offers?
We'll get to that. we'll get to that. We're going to move into a segment of the show. It's a new segment that we're starting. Actually, we started it last show last year, and we're going to continue it on. Where at the end of the show, we're actually going to, I guess, call it kind of go off script a little bit, and kind of shoot the bull. Just Mike and I talk about these issues. We have gotten some feedback about tying, let's say, politics, we've already mentioned it here a couple times, into our business coverage. We think it's important. We are seeing kind of a new administration come in. They have a different way of dealing with companies, with manufacturing in particular, we're seeing so far, that we have probably not seen. You're the history guy. When was the last president that ever kind of bare-knuckled business?
Oh my gosh. I mean, tariffs of this nature have really not existed for a long, long time. I mean, early 20th century.
Okay.
I mean, the Republican administrations of the 1920s were very pro-business, very low regulatory environment, and very protectionist in a way, very isolationist. So yeah, 80 years, 90 years, long time.
Well, we want to get more into this, and we're going to have coverage like this, this commentary section, which we're going into right now, as the time, as our shows roll on. So you're going to see more of this. If you've got any comments about this, feel free to shoot them at us. We do think it's important. Most of our viewers are in manufacturing, and so a lot of what we're going to see, we believe, in the incoming administration is a lot of focus on manufacturing. Yes. Trump has made that a big part of his campaign, bringing jobs back to America, and he's doing and saying a lot of things that we think are important to cover. So you will see some of this work its way into the show. We think it's necessary for our audience. So. Regarding your question, do you think, carrot and stick and imposing, as Trump said, he said he was going to impose really stiff tariffs on Toyota more, for bringing cars into manufactured outside of America into America. What do you think of that?
To me, I don't think that's ever the way to go. I mean, I think that there's a place for that. There's certainly industries you need to protect as much as you can that are vital. But I mean, the free hand of the market has worked for hundreds of years, and I mean, I think that ultimately you've got to make it as easy for the consumers in your country to purchase those products. And tariffs are only going to be passed on in terms of higher prices to those people. If you want a Toyota Corolla and you have to pay an extra $1,000 because of the money it took for Toyota to bring it into the country, well, you may choose a different car, or most likely, if you really want a Corolla, you're going to pay for that Corolla. And either the consumer or the dealer is going to have to take the hit on that. So, and probably both to a certain extent. So I don't think tariffs really work long term. I think ultimately it's going to hurt the people you're intending to help, which is the American consumer and the American manufacturers and the dealers that sell that stuff to the people, because there's costs that are going to cascade through the system from doing that, I think.
Well, I mean, there have been examples, and I can think of one in the past where, and this was a very specific tariff for a very specific industry, and that was Harley-Davidson.
Yeah,
and remember, back in the 80s, Harley was floundering for a lot of reasons, part of it because they were making crap motorcycles, frankly, at the time.
Right.
But they were being eaten alive by the Japanese. Yes. And so there was I think it was a 50%, that's a huge tariff on Japanese bikes coming into the country. And it was that and a bunch of management changes and other changes, organizational changes to Harley, but it did help bring Harley back into the fold, and you might be able to make the argument they might not have survived if it weren't for that it was a short-term tariff, but it might not have survived if it weren't for that.
It was a breathing space. It was
a breathing space.
It wasn't intended to be an ongoing policy where every time a Japanese bike was brought into the country forever, there was going to be this huge tariff, because ultimately that would drive the Japanese out of the market, and there'd be less choice for the customers. People would pay more for Harleys and Harley wouldn't have been forced to improve, and they would have paid more for a substandard bike. I mean, market forces exist for good reason, and I think that if you let that roll, you're going to generally be better off than trying to protect it and control it within reason. I mean, there's some industries, steel was another good example, where you need to have some protections in place because it's vital to the country and the success of the country.
So the upshot is you feel carrot is more important than stick?
Yes, I think carrot is more important than stick. And the other thing I think is that, a little off topic, is I think this focus on manufacturing. I know we obviously have a manufacturing base. I mean, service jobs to me are more important, or at least as important. And what is this administration doing to foster more small business, more service jobs, more jobs that align with the future of work, that's more automated, as opposed to turning screws? I mean, we got to do it all. We want to give as many job opportunities to American workers as we can, but there's a lot more beyond manufacturing that should be considered here.
Well, some of the business regulations that Trump wants to roll back should end up helping small business as well. One would assume. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
That's right. We're going to find out.
All right.
Well, that is our show for this week, for our first show of 2017. Let us know what you think. We again, you're going to see a lot more articles from us posing these types of issues, and push back on us and comment and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you with your comments, as always. So thanks to all of you for joining us this week. Thanks, Dirk, for being there as always.
Sure.
We will see you next week. I'm not here next week. You're on your own, Dirk, but Dirk will have a big show for you next week. So
I'll have a discussion with myself.
That's right. That'll be fun. Maybe you'll have a discussion with all of them.
Maybe so.
All right.
Well, call in. Yeah.
You guys all have a great week, and we'll see you then.
So long.
Bye.